most countries. U.S. banks stand to collect a record $38.5 billion in fees for customer overdrafts this year, and the year, of course, ain't over yet, with the bulk of the revenue coming from the most financially stretched customers amid the deepest recession since the 1930s. The fees are nearly double those reported in 2000. And this a grim reminder of the fact that Elliot Spitzer back in years ago, back in February 2008 actually, was warning us about this, that the banks have been basically turned from nice, safe, predictable, boring, consistently profitable but not incredibly profitable utilities into casinos. And I think it's a terrible thing. It's one of the things that is damaging America. Dan Gainor, the Vice President and T. Boone Pickens Free Market Fellow at the Business and Media Institute, businessandmedia.org, is on the line with us. And Dan, hey, welcome to the show, first of all. Hey, Dan.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Hey, it's a pleasure. Welcome to my wonderful non-studio from near the wonderful liberal Columbia, Maryland.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, hey, we're bringing Dan in by Skype, so if you're watching our free video over at ThomHartmann.com or hanging out in our free live chat room at ThomHartmann.com, you can see Dan's smiling face. Dan, here's my position on this, and tell me why any conservative would be opposed to this. This seems to me like a Barry Goldwater position, frankly. Banks are the and why Thomas Jefferson said, banks are more dangerous than standing armies. Banks are the utilities that facilitate commerce. Banks don't make things. They allow companies to have access to capital so they can make things. Banks don't pay my bills. They are the means by which I pay my bills. I have no problem with banks operating on a for-profit basis, but why should they be allowed to get into the gambling casino business, basically, into the stock market? Why should they be trading and operating in a way that is purely based on maximizing their profits rather than providing a benefit to us?
Well, they do provide a benefit to us. In case you hadn't noticed, we have a whole bunch of banks. The great thing about the free market is you get to choose which one you want. There's a lot of coverage right now on Capitol Hill about the issue of fees, whether you get the overdraft fees or not. Representative Carolyn Maloney is going after the banks. But 10 of the major banks have already changed their overdraft fees because they're losing out on their credit cards to debit cards at the very same time. I mean, you must have seen It's a Wonderful Life and not taken the right message from it. The right message is for every Mr. Potter, there's also a community group.
But Dan, you say there's competition, but the reality is that banking in the United States is handled by a cartel. There's about a dozen companies that basically control virtually all of the banking, the vast majority of banking in the United States, and even the small banks are starting to make a profit. And when you allow, it used to be that we said, okay, banks, you can recover the actual cost of somebody bouncing a check. So if you bounced a check, it was a $3.50 charge. This is back when I was a kid. And nowadays, it's like, hey, you can make a profit on this. So they have an incentive now for when I deposit a check to hold that money for 3 days and say, no, you don't actually have that money, in the hopes that I'll write a check against it, it will bounce, and they can make a $35 or $40 or $50 fee. That's a perverse incentive.
No, first of all, only 1 in 6 people uses their overdraft protection, according to a study in the last year. And then the vast majority of those are happy with getting the overdraft protection. Why? Because otherwise checks would bounce. Their rent would not get paid. Their mortgage would not get paid. So they pay these bills when the people don't have the money. If the bank shut this down tomorrow and said, we're not going to give you overdraft protection, you can just hang it out, then all sorts of other bills
I'm not suggesting
it
should go away. What I'm saying is that we should say to the banks, many of our banks right now are making more profit on overdraft protection than they are on their core business. And the banks should be in the core business of banking. They shouldn't be in the business of playing gotcha. This is gotcha.
It's only gotcha because a lot of people in this country learn the wrong lessons, or frankly learn no lessons from going to the public school system about how to handle their money. I mean, you don't use overdraft protection if you actually pay your bills correctly. You don't like the bank you're going to, go to a credit union. I belong to both a regular bank and I'm a proud member of the MICU, Municipal Employees Credit Union in Maryland, because my father was in it. You can join that. They don't even have a fee per se. It goes into a revolving line of credit.
No, I'm a big fan of credit unions, and I'm with you on that. But
so then go to credit unions if you don't like the banks. Problem solved. You're a solution looking for a problem.
But the banks are ubiquitous, and the credit unions can be hard to find, and particularly for low income people, they can be very hard to even get to. And beyond that, back to the original question, our banking system, just the entire banking system, up until the last 30 years, from the time of the Great Depression when the banks all failed and Roosevelt called a banking holiday, and then when he brought them back in, he said, "Okay, guys, brand new set of rules. When you play Monopoly, if you get Marvin Gardens and things, you can just squeeze the rents out of people. But if you get one of the utilities, the railroads, the banks, you only make $100 every time you go around. It's or $200 or whatever it is. It's absolutely predictable. It's safe, boring, and predictable. I want our banking system to be safe, boring, and predictable, and I don't understand why you think that our banking system should be part of the wild, wild west of laissez-faire free enterprise."
Well, banks are one of the most regulated commodities we've got out there. They've got government getting involved with currency.
Nothing close to what it was before Graham Leach blew up Glass Steagall.
Again, you're all worried about the banks because, we've actually had some bank failures this year. We've had hardly any in comparison to what we've had in the 80s.
Because we're pouring hundreds of billions of dollars at them.
Then let what we should have done, because we do have rules to handle some bank failures. We should have let some of these banks fail.
Well, I absolutely agree with you on that. But the point is that they wouldn't have gotten in the position to fail if we hadn't had 30 years of Reaganomics. If Bill Clinton hadn't signed on to this,
the reason why they're in a position to fail is because government intervenes. When government intervenes.
No, it was when government backed off that the banks went in the tank, Dan.
When firms know that they're going to be bailed out, like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac knew that they would be bailed out, government-sponsored entities, they knew they could do whatever they wanted, then there's no incentive for them to behave. You're
changing the topic. We're not going to debate Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I'm talking about our banking system. Why can't our banking system be, the guys in the green eye shades that make the nice predictable income and they've got a pension and they got a career? Instead, I go into my bank and I've got minimum wage employees who half the time don't even know what they're. The other day I had a two-party check, a check made out to somebody else who on the back had signed it over to me, and the clerk in the bank didn't know what that was or how to handle it. I mean, that's how bad customer service has gotten.
You know what?
Because the banks are all
trying to.
trying to.
For you. Pick a better bank.
It's the only bank within a mile and a half of me. It's the only bank I can walk to.
Okay, well then complain to the boss about the fact that they do a lousy job.
No, I want to complain to I want to complain to my elected officials and say, bring back our banks as regulated institutions that help lubricate the business of America rather than skimming all the cream off the top.
You want to get government involved in regulating the banking sector because you got lousy customer service.
From 1935
what's next? You're going to go after McDonald's because you don't like the way they serve you your Big Mac?
No, I'm talking about banks. Dan, from 1935 until the 1980s with the S&Ls, when the S&Ls were deregulated under Reagan, boom, they fell apart. But from the and then into the 1990s, from the 1935 until that time, that was the first time in the history of this country that we had gone more than 14 years without a banking panic. Why? Because FDR regulated the banks.
I'm old enough to remember bad customer service from banks back in the 70s as well. Like I said, if you're only willing to walk to your bank, then you've got a different issue. That's using a neutron bomb to kill a gnat.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that, Dan. I do need to. I need to get to a credit union and quick. Businessandmedia.org. Dan Gainor. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Good talking with you. The report was released by the nonprofit Center for Responsible Lending. Banks and credit unions profited a whopping $24 billion in overdraft fees in 2008, a 35% increase from 2006. 51 million people were hit with the fees. That's 1 in 6 Americans. And why? Because ever since banking deregulation, the banks have gone from being a public utility, basically, to just another business that's out there to make as much money as it can. You know, what's the big picture here? I mean, the really big picture. The really big picture is that when Jefferson said banks can be more dangerous than standing armies, he was right. We've had a couple of attempts in the United States. We had one during the Lincoln administration. We had one during the Kennedy administration when the government the Treasury actually issued U.S. notes, actually issued its own money, where instead of it being, issued by the Federal Reserve or by private banks. And it was a good thing. It worked for the country. The greenback under Lincoln, the United States note under Kennedy and Johnson, all gone now. And the trade-out that Franklin Roosevelt, in 1913, the Fed came along long before Roosevelt was in power. The trade-out that Roosevelt made was, we're going to keep the Fed in place. We're going to keep our banking system in place, although he did shut them all down. We had a banking holiday. He just closed the whole damn thing. So that's it. Now we're going to reboot the system. And we're going to say that the banks are public utilities. We've got now banks being bought and sold, mergers and acquisitions. We've got banks that are owned by foreign corporations. We've got banks that are owned by foreigners. We've got, some of our largest banks in the United States are owned in large part by Saudi Arabia and China and investors thereof. All of this is crazy. I'm not absolutely opposed to a bank being a publicly traded corporation, but it needs to be one that is so tightly regulated that we never again have to pour $1 trillion and maybe as much as $9 trillion into the banks to keep them alive. Our banks, because of the deregulation of Phil and Wendy Graham, remember Wendy, she was on the board of Enron, and she passed through the Commodities Future Trading Modernization Act so that Enron could make a fortune and kill their employees, basically. Actually, some of their employees died. They committed suicide, or, it was just a disaster. Thanks a lot, Wendy Graham. And then Phil Graham, as a United States Senator, and as a lobbyist, pushed through the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act that blew up Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall was a law that was put into place back in the 30s by Franklin Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, and the Democratic Congress that said a bank has to be a bank. A bank cannot be a gambling house. You want to have a gambling house, you call it a brokerage. You call it a brokerage firm, or you call it something else. You call it a gambling house. You call it an investment house. Or you could even call it an investment bank if you want to sound really slick. But a bank doesn't play with money. It doesn't invest money. It doesn't hope to make big profits on money. It doesn't gamble with money. A bank takes in deposits, loans out money, issues mortgages, doesn't resell those mortgages in secondary markets, and then buy insurance, and then tranche them up, and then slice and dice them and sell them to millions of people and in all over the world as big investments. All of that stuff should not be being done by banks. Banks should be a public utility. They should be a public trust. This is a very straightforward process or way of thinking of this. Is that our banks need to be answerable to us, and our banks, it gets back to the issue of the commons. The commons is that stuff that we can't live without. We all need to breathe clean air. We all need to drink fresh water. We all need to know that our food is safe. We all need access to medical care. We all need an education. These are the core commons things. We need public roads that we can travel on. We need police and fire. These are the proper areas of government. I would argue, frankly, that banking is a proper area of government, but I'm not going to go that far in this rant. But simply to say that at the heavy regulation of our banks is a proper area of government. How much money has Canada spent bailing out their banks? Canada, where the banks are very highly regulated? Zero. Not a dollar, not a dime, zip, nada. Most of the countries of the world have not spent any money bailing out their banks. Whose banks have been bailed out? The United States and the United Kingdom. What were the two countries that were hit by Reaganomics and Thatcheronomics? This wacky notion that, we'll just deregulate everything and everything will be fine. The United States and the United Kingdom. We've got a serious problem in these two countries. A serious problem in these two countries. And the way to solve this problem is to say, we're going to tightly regulate the way the banks act. We're going to go back to those rules. It is absolutely true what I was saying. I mean, you look it up. From the founding of this country, I mean, even when we were operating under the Articles of Confederation before the Constitution, after the end of the Revolutionary War, from the founding of this country until the 1930s, we never went more than 15 years without a bank panic. In two of my books, I think in Threshold, I'm pretty sure it's in Threshold, and I know it's also in Unequal Protection, I tell the story of how Abraham Lincoln got a paycheck, rather large paycheck for a job that he did, went to the bank, cashed it, and turned it into cash. And it was a good thing he did, because 3 days later it was the biggest bank panic of his lifetime, and 30 of the banks in the area where he lived in Illinois went out of business. Everybody lost everything. We never went more than 15 years without a banking panic in the entire history of this country until after Franklin Roosevelt passed the Glass-Steagall Act in 1935 or 36. And from Glass-Steagall, from the heavy regulation of the banks, up until the late 1990s when the banks were deregulated, we didn't have any banking panics. Now, in the 1980s, the S&Ls were deregulated under the Reagan administration. He couldn't deregulate the entire banking system the way he wanted, so he just did the S&Ls. Oh, let's turn the S&Ls into a cauldron of democracy. Right, that worked real well. That one cost the American taxpayer $400 billion. This one's costing us somewhere between $1 and $7 trillion. Coming up next, your calls and thoughts on these issues. Scott in Austin, Texas. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, what's up?
I was just calling to respond to your last guest that you were debating.
Yeah, Dan Gainor.
And well, first I want to say I really look up to you. I've read most of your books. I'm an adult sufferer of ADD. So
welcome to the club.
Dealing with banks, dealing with a checking account have especially been a challenge for me. Mm-hmm. I work for myself. I'm currently in a situation with Wells Fargo where they one of the things
we should regulate banks for ADD, Scott.
Absolutely.
So anyhow, what's your point? What's the point you want to make?
What Wells Fargo does a lot of times is, I do a pretty good job of keeping my checking account balanced, but sometimes I'm off a little bit. I have trouble with sequence and dealing with numbers. But what they'll do sometimes is, like, I'll have like a car payment or a rent payment, and I'll be off by maybe $3 or $4. And what they do is, even though I've had, if you have like a bunch of small charges, like $3, $4, $5 charges, and then a big one comes in, like, they will put that one at the top,
right,
and charge it out first, so that they can charge you,
so they can ding you for all the small ones. So that's pretty creepy, Scott. Thank you for sharing that story. I'll tell you the other thing that I've noticed the banks are doing, and that is that if you have an overdraft, and say you've got enough money in your savings account to cover the overdraft, and you have a credit card to the bank, they throw it to the credit card so that you're instantly paying credit card fees now instead of just, it's the savings account. I mean, they've got all these sleazy and sneaky ways, basically, to make off with our money. And I think it's just wrong. Matt in Brooklyn, New York, I think they should be regulated. Hey, Matt, what's up?
Well, Tom, I had a similar problem with Citibank. Citibank used to have this great thing. I've had this overdraft protection for over 10 years, and it worked perfectly. If I was cutting things a little close, I would go into my credit line, and there'd be interest it was kind of a crazy interest amount, like 21% or something, compounded by the second. But at least it would be, if I paid it off in a couple days, that was fine.
Right.
And then about a year ago, I sort of got blindsided by this, because I don't keep that close check on all my stuff, as long as I know I have the money there. And I suddenly started getting hit by these, I think they were $35 fees. And when I contacted the bank, it's like, well, that's for the privilege of using the overdraft protection. So
that's for the privilege of paying us interest.
Yes. So I would get the $35 plus interest and not even know that I got charged it. And they get you no matter what.
Yeah, I had one where I was out of town. I hadn't moved money from my savings account into my checking account, so that a payment that was going to hit it that I knew it was coming, and I just I wasn't paying attention. And instead of taking the money out of the savings account, they took it out of a credit card that I never used, but the bank gave me when I opened the account, or kind of required me to have, I guess. And so then I went in and I immediately paid off the credit card, right, out of the savings account, figuring, okay, I'll pay everything down to zero within 24 hours. And not only did they ding me with a month's credit for that, plus the fee for the transfer, but in the following month there was another $4 or $5 on the credit card because apparently they charge you 2 months of I don't even know how they calculate this stuff. It makes me crazy, but it's like they made a whole lot of money over that, and it's I don't mind banks. Matt, thanks for the call. I don't mind banks making money, but let's have them make money by doing the good old-fashioned, honest stuff of lending out money. Lending, money lenders. This is, Elliot Spitzer, Thursday, February 14th, 2008. This is back before his sex scandal, before, when he was still, the head guy in New York. Several years ago, states' attorney generals and others involved in consumer protection began to notice a marked increase in a range of predatory lending practices by mortgage lenders. And he goes through this whole thing about how, now this isn't the banks, but the banks were included in this, how they were basically scamming people. They were lying to people. And the attorneys general of virtually, I think it was 48 states, no, it was all 50 states. The federal government's agents' actions were so egregious and so unprecedented that all 50 states' attorney generals and all 50 state banking superintendents actively fought the new rules. What they did was the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, this is from Elliot Spitzer's op-ed in the Washington Post, the OCC invoked a clause from the 1863 National Bank Act that basically prevented states, now it's me speaking, not Elliot Spitzer, basically prevented states from enforcing protections of their own customers. I mean, that's how incredibly bad it is. Steve in New York. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, how are you, Tom?
Good, what's up?
I just called to very quickly say that I don't find... first of all, I know you don't like to criticize people who aren't there, but that guy was on drugs, plain and simple. And here's why I say that. I have been with a credit union with more than one credit union for the past 10 to 12 years. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I have had them ding my account. One time they dinged my account with 3 fees, and I emailed them about it. I said, what's this about? And they gave me an explanation. And I emailed them back saying, well, wait a minute. If you look at the timing of how each thing cleared, it doesn't add up. Then they gave me another explanation. Then I emailed again. Look, it doesn't add up. And they just ignored my emails.
So the essence of what you're saying, Steve, is just like some of the so-called nonprofit insurance companies and HMOs are doing the same for-profit, whatever you want to call it, that the for-profit ones are ripping us off. Let
me tell you one other story, real quick, because I know there's lots of people. I bought a car, used a credit union. I'm in New York. The seller is in Colorado. They said we need the title and documents. We faxed the documents to them. They mailed the documents to me. Never received them. 2 weeks go by, nothing. No one ever calls me. Finally, they say, "Oh yeah, well you have to get a new title." So go out in Colorado, go to the DMV there, and it's very simple. It was $8 to get a new title. Right. They said they'd reimburse me. 1 month passes, no reimbursement. 2 months pass, no reimbursement. Right. 3 months pass, no reimbursement.
Yeah.
So then I finally say, look, do I get to charge you a fee? Because if I waited 3 months to pay you anything, you'd ding my credit, you'd be charging me fees, you'd be making phone calls to me. I got no response.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are well said, Steve. Thank you. These are the games that they're playing, and the health insurance companies are playing the same ones. My health insurance company has a good plan and a kind of crummy plan. And to get into the good plan, you've got to go through 4 different websites, fill out all these forms about how healthy you are, and yes, I got my flu shot, or yes, I go to a gym, or blah, 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 blah. And I spent 2 hours last night, because it's the open enrollment period where you can change and make sure that you actually get the good plan. And if you don't get the good plan, then they stick you in the crummy plan automatically. And I spent 2 hours last night on the internet trying to figure out these things. And I'm not a stupid person. I know how to use the internet, and I never successfully did it. I could never successfully figure out how to enroll in the damn plan. And I am convinced that this health insurance company just wants to have the good plan so that they can brag about it and tell people about it, but they don't actually want anybody in it. Bob in Phoenix, we've got a minute to the break. Bob, what's up?
Well, why wouldn't you just complain simply to the bank manager instead of wanting,
Because the bank manager has no power.
No power. You have the power by taking your money out of the bank.
And go to another one of the big banks that's playing the exact same game.
Go to a small community bank. How many banks are there in the United States? A couple tens of thousands?
There's lots of them. I can tell you there's no small community bank within any kind of convenient distance of my house.
Well, take a bus.
Take a bus. Bob, ultimately at the end of the day that may end up being the best advice. But even the small community banks now are playing these games.
But the difference is a liberal wants somebody else to fight their battle. The United States of America needs to learn that it's the people who are the rulers.
Yeah, the people. It's all up to the people. It's your fault. You're the people. You're the stupid ones. It's not the big corporations. It's not the giant monopolies. Oh, God, no. We've got to protect them. It's you stupid people.